The mist clung to the cemetery like a shroud, weaving between weathered headstones that jutted from the earth like forgotten teeth. Martin had been digging graves for 30 years, his calloused hands as familiar with death as with the shovel he gripped. That's when he noticed him, a stranger in a dark coat, methodically measuring a plot in the oldest section, consulting yellowed papers. No burial was scheduled there. The man returned 3 days in a row, always to the same unmarked spot. When Martin finally checked the cemetery's ancient records, what he found made his blood run cold. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what Martin discovered in those dusty old maps. The cemetery had been Martin's sanctuary for 3 decades, a place where he found peace among the dead that often eluded him among the living. At 57, his weathered face mapped the outdoor life he'd led, skin tanned and creased like old leather, gray hair thinning beneath his worn cap. The townspeople respected him, but kept their distance. The gravedigger was necessary but never quite welcome at their dinner tables. Martin had come to this profession after losing his wife and infant daughter in childbirth 28 years ago. Their graves lay beneath the old oak at the cemetery's edge, and each evening he would sit with them, sharing the day's events in whispered conversations. Digging graves had become his therapy, each shovelful of earth a meditation, each burial a reminder that others shared his pain. He lived in the small caretaker's cottage at the cemetery's edge, surrounded by books on local history and geology. Martin had become an unofficial historian of the grounds, knowing more about who lay beneath the soil than anyone in town. This knowledge had always given him a quiet dignity, a purpose beyond mere grave digging. Until the stranger arrived. "Excuse me, but you're trespassing in a restricted area," Martin called out on the 4th day, approaching the man with measured steps. The stranger, tall, academic-looking with wire-rimmed glasses, barely glanced up from his measuring tape. "Actually, I have permission from the Historical Society." His voice carried the polished accent of university education. "I'm the caretaker. I should have been notified. Are you?" The man finally looked at Martin, taking in his dirt-stained clothes and weathered appearance. "Well, perhaps you can help. I'm Professor Harrington from the State University. We're researching potential historical burial sites. Several members of the town council happened to be visiting a nearby grave and had wandered over." "Martin," called Councilman Phillips with a smirk, "don't bother the professor. This is important historical work." "But the records show," Martin began. "Records?" Harrington laughed softly. "Your little collection of papers. We have satellite imaging and ground-penetrating radar. Perhaps stick to what you know best, digging." The council members chuckled, and Martin felt the familiar sting of dismissal. But something about that unmarked plot and the stranger's interest in it gnawed at him. The maps he'd found suggested secrets that no radar could reveal. That night, Martin couldn't sleep. The stranger's condescension echoed in his mind as he pored over the cemetery's oldest map spread across his kitchen table. The yellowed parchment showed markings that didn't align with the current layout, particularly in that northeastern corner where Professor Harrington had been measuring. "There's something there," Martin whispered to himself, tracing the faded ink with his fingertip. "Something they don't understand." The next morning, Martin arrived early to find Harrington already there with 2 graduate students and expensive-looking equipment. The professor barely acknowledged him. "We'll need this area cordoned off," Harrington announced, not bothering to look up. "Your groundskeeping will have to work around us for the next few weeks." "This is consecrated ground," Martin said, his voice steady despite the anger building inside. "There are protocols for any disturbance." Harrington sighed dramatically. "Mr. What was it again?" "Keller. Martin Keller. Mr. Keller, this project has been approved at the highest levels. The university has determined this area contains historically significant remains predating the cemetery's official establishment. But my records indicate." "Your records?" Harrington laughed, glancing at his students who joined in. "Hand-scribbled notes from village idiots a century ago. We're using ground-penetrating radar and spectral analysis. Perhaps you should stick to your shovel." The students snickered, and Martin felt his face flush. He retreated to his cottage, hands trembling with humiliation. 3 days later, things escalated. Martin arrived to find a small excavation had begun, with soil samples being collected in labeled containers. When he approached, Harrington was speaking to a group that included the mayor and several prominent townspeople. "Ah, our local digger," Harrington announced loudly. "Come to learn some real archaeology." The mayor looked uncomfortable but said nothing as Harrington continued. "We found evidence of a mass grave dating to the 1840s. Quite remarkable, really. Something your caretaking missed entirely." That's impossible, Martin said. The northeastern quadrant was never used for burials. The soil there is too. Too what? Harrington interrupted. Please, enlighten us with your expert geological assessment. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, but several chuckled. The town records clearly show. Town records? Harrington's voice dripped with disdain. The same records that failed to document the Spanish influenza victims we've just discovered. Perhaps it's time to acknowledge that some actual expertise has arrived in your little cemetery. The mayor patted Martin's shoulder. We appreciate your dedication, Martin, but let's let the professionals handle this research. Martin walked away, the weight of public humiliation heavier than any coffin he'd ever carried. The final blow came a week later. Martin found a construction crew setting up equipment near the excavation site. Harrington stood nearby, directing operations with obvious satisfaction. What's happening here? Martin demanded. Progress, Mr. Keller. The university is establishing a permanent research facility. Your cottage will be repurposed as our field office. You can't do that. My home is university property, Harrington finished. The Board of Trustees has terminated your residency effective next month. Don't worry, there's a nice retirement community in the next county. As the workers laughed, something broke inside Martin. He turned and walked slowly back to his cottage, ignoring the pitying glances from townspeople gathered to watch. That evening, alone among his books and maps, Martin pulled out a leather-bound journal from behind a loose brick in the fireplace. Inside were detailed notes, diagrams, and correspondence with the State Archaeological Society, where he had served as a consulting expert for 15 years. His fingers traced over his doctoral diploma in historical preservation, carefully hidden away after his family's death when he'd chosen a simpler life. Time to remember who I was, he whispered, reaching for the phone. The university's Chancellor Blackwood watched the unfolding drama from her town car. Interesting, she murmured, tapping a manicured nail against her tablet. Pull Harrington's funding application. I believe our cemetery caretaker isn't quite what he seems. The morning air carried a chill that seeped through Martin's worn cardigan as he stood at the edge of the cemetery, watching Harrington's team set up their equipment. The professor moved with the confident swagger of a man who believed victory was already his, directing students with theatrical gestures while occasionally glancing toward Martin's cottage with undisguised satisfaction. Martin clutched a leather portfolio to his chest, its edges frayed from years of handling. Inside lay the culmination of 3 sleepless nights, meticulous notes, cross-referenced maps, and carefully documented inconsistencies in Harrington's research. His fingers traced the embossed initials on the cover, M.K., Ph.D. A reminder of the man he once was, before grief had driven him to seek solace in the quiet company of the dead. Time to remember, he whispered to himself, straightening his shoulders as he approached the excavation site. Harrington noticed him immediately, a smirk forming on his lips. Come to watch real academics at work, Gravedigger. Several students snickered, but Martin noticed a few uncomfortable glances exchanged among them. Good. Not everyone was enamored with Harrington's bullying. Actually, Professor, Martin said, his voice steadier than it had been in years, I've come to discuss some discrepancies in your findings. Harrington's smile faltered slightly. Discrepancies? How quaint. Perhaps you'd like to explain to my graduate students how your groundskeeping expertise qualifies you to question peer-reviewed methodology. Martin opened his portfolio and removed a series of maps. These are the original survey maps of the cemetery from 1832, 1867, and 1901. He laid them carefully on a nearby table. And this, he continued, pulling out a modern topographical survey, is a ground-penetrating radar scan of the northeastern quadrant conducted by the State Archaeological Society 3 years ago. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Harrington's face. Where did you get those? I requested them, Martin replied simply. As a consulting member of the society. The silence that followed was profound. Several students moved closer, curiosity overcoming their previous disdain. You see, Martin continued, his voice gaining strength, the area you're claiming contains Spanish influenza victims couldn't possibly hold a mass grave. The bedrock rises to within 4 feet of the surface here. He pointed to a shaded area on the map, making it unsuitable for burials, especially hasty ones during an epidemic. A young woman with glasses stepped forward, examining the maps. He's right, Professor. The soil samples we collected showed unusual density at that depth. Harrington's face reddened. This is absurd. These maps could be forgeries. They carry the state archivist's authentication, Martin countered, pointing to the official seals. But more importantly, they're consistent with the ground-penetrating radar results, which show no evidence of human remains in this quadrant. Then explain the bone fragments we found, Harrington challenged, though his voice had lost some of its certainty. Martin nodded, as if expecting the question. I believe those came from the old potter's field that once existed about 30 yards east of here. He pulled out another document. According to these records, it was relocated in 1912 when the cemetery expanded, but some remains were likely missed during the transfer, a common occurrence in that era. The same female student was now flipping through her field notes. Our carbon dating did place the fragments closer to 1910 than 1918, Professor. Harrington's face had gone from red to pale. This proves nothing. The university has already approved our research facility. About that, came a new voice from behind them. The crowd parted to reveal Chancellor Blackwood, elegant in a charcoal suit despite the early hour. Her presence sent a ripple of whispers through the students. Chancellor, Harrington stammered, what a pleasant surprise. Is it? She asked coolly, approaching the table to examine Martin's maps. Dr. Keller, these are quite impressive. Your reputation at the society speaks for itself. Martin inclined his head slightly. Thank you, Chancellor. Doctor, one of the students whispered loudly. Chancellor Blackwood turned to Harrington. It seems there's been a misunderstanding about the scope and validity of your project, Professor. The board will need to review your grant application again in light of this new information. But the field office, the cottage, Harrington sputtered, will remain Mr. Keller's residence, she finished firmly. The university has no interest in displacing someone with his expertise, especially when that expertise could have prevented this embarrassing situation had you bothered to consult him. Harrington's face contorted with barely contained rage. This is outrageous. My reputation is precisely what concerns me, Chancellor Blackwood interrupted. The university cannot afford to be associated with research that ignores established archaeological protocols or dismisses local knowledge. She turned to the students. Pack up your equipment. This excavation is suspended pending review. As the students began dismantling their setup, Harrington stormed off toward his car, muttering about appeals and academic freedom. Chancellor Blackwood turned to Martin. Walk with me, Dr. Keller. They strolled along the cemetery's winding path, morning sunlight filtering through ancient oaks. You could have exposed him years ago, she observed. Your credentials would have silenced his mockery immediately. Martin watched a fallen leaf skitter across the path. After my family died, academic credentials seemed unimportant. This place gave me peace when nothing else could. And yet you maintained your work with the society. He nodded. Some habits are hard to break. The dead still have stories that deserve respect. Indeed. She paused beside an ornate Victorian monument. The university would benefit from your expertise, Dr. Keller. Perhaps a special consultant position. You could remain here, of course. Martin considered the offer, looking across the familiar grounds that had been his sanctuary. I'll think about it. Do. She handed him a business card. And Martin. The board never approved Harrington's request to repurpose your cottage. Some of us recognized your name from your earlier work and delayed the paperwork. A small smile touched Martin's lips. Thank you. After the Chancellor departed, Martin returned to the excavation site. Most of the equipment had been removed, but a few students remained, including the young woman with glasses. Dr. Keller, she approached hesitantly. I'm Emma Winters. I've read your paper on preserving historical burial grounds. It's why I chose this field. Martin felt something long dormant stir within him, the satisfaction of sharing knowledge. Perhaps you'd like to see the correct location of the influenza burials. With proper respect, there are important historical lessons there. Emma's eyes lit up. I'd be honored. As they walked through the cemetery, Martin found himself pointing out historical details and sharing stories of the people resting beneath the stones. For the first time in years, his expertise felt not like a burden of the past, but a bridge to the future. That evening, sitting in his cottage with a cup of tea, Martin opened his old journal and made a new entry. The weight that had pressed upon him for so long seemed lighter somehow. He had reclaimed a piece of himself without losing the peace he'd found among the silent stones. What's your story? I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop a comment below and let me know what part of the world you're experiencing this tale from. The next morning, Martin found an envelope slipped under his door. Inside, old photographs of himself at a restricted dig site years ago, and a note, Harrington knows what really happened in Peru. Meet at midnight or everyone learns the truth. Martin stared at the note, his hands trembling slightly. Peru. A name he hadn't allowed himself to think about for years. The photographs showed a younger version of himself standing at the edge of a dig site, his face illuminated by flashlights in the darkness. Images he thought had been destroyed. He paced his cottage, the floorboards creaking beneath his feet. Chancellor Blackwood's card sat on his desk, a lifeline to respectability he'd only just begun to consider. Now this. Harrington was desperate, cornered, and therefore dangerous. As dusk settled over the cemetery, Martin made his decision. He couldn't run from the past any longer. He reached for his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. Emma? It's Martin Keller. I need your help. 2 hours later, Emma arrived with an older woman Martin recognized immediately. Dr. Ramirez, he said, extending his hand. It's been a long time. 15 years, she replied, her dark eyes studying him. Emma says you're in trouble. Martin spread the photographs across his kitchen table. Harrington somehow got these. He wants to meet at midnight. Dr. Ramirez picked up one of the images. The Waka, Colorado site. The night of the storm. I never told anyone what happened, Martin said quietly. Neither did I, she replied. But perhaps it's time. Emma looked between them. What exactly are we dealing with here? Martin took a deep breath. A discovery that was never meant to be found. And a choice I made that cost lives. As midnight approached, the three of them moved through the cemetery like shadows. Martin had spent years learning every path, every hidden corner of this place. Now that knowledge would serve a different purpose. Harrington will expect me to come alone to the old mausoleum, Martin explained as they crouched behind a row of weathered headstones. Emma, you'll circle around to the eastern entrance. Dr. Ramirez, take the western approach. What if he's not alone? Emma whispered, her breath visible in the cold night air. He won't be, Martin replied grimly. Academic rivalries rarely stay academic when reputations are at stake. The cemetery at midnight was a different world, a landscape of silver and shadow under the waning moon. The mausoleum stood at its center, a neoclassical structure of weathered marble that housed the remains of the town's founding family. Martin checked his watch. 11:55 p.m. Remember, we need the original photographs and any copies. And whatever you do, don't let him see you until I give the signal. They separated, each taking their assigned position. Martin approached the mausoleum directly, his footsteps crunching on the gravel path. The massive iron door stood ajar, a sliver of yellow light spilling out. Right on time, Keller, Harrington's voice echoed from inside. Always the punctual gravedigger. Martin stepped through the doorway. The interior was lit by several battery-powered lanterns placed around the perimeter. Harrington stood beside the central sarcophagus, a leather portfolio in his hands. Behind him, a young man Martin recognized as Harrington's research assistant nervously shifted his weight. I came as requested, Martin said evenly. Let's see what you think you have. Harrington smiled thinly. Not what I think I have. What I know I have. He opened the portfolio and removed several enlarged photographs. The Waka, Colorado expedition. The night you and your team discovered something that never made it into any official report. Martin's eyes flicked to the photographs. They showed more than he'd realized, the excavated chamber, the artifacts arranged in a pattern, and worst of all, the bodies. You were never there, Martin said. These could be from anywhere. Oh, but I have verification. Harrington nodded to his assistant, who produced a tablet. Your colleague Dr. Vega was quite forthcoming before his unfortunate accident last year. He left quite a detailed account. Martin felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. Carlos Vega had been the expedition photographer. The official report stated he died in a hiking accident in the Andes. What do you want, Harrington? Simple. Your public support for my research. Your endorsement of my methods. And your silence about this little disagreement regarding the influenza graves. Harrington's smile widened. In return, these photos and Vega's testimony remain private. Martin heard the faint sound of movement outside, Emma and Dr. Ramirez getting into position. He needed to keep Harrington talking. Those graves matter to this community. I won't help you desecrate them. Noble sentiments from a man with such blood on his hands. Harrington tapped one of the photographs. How many died that night, Keller? 4. 5. All because you insisted on removing the artifacts despite the warnings. It was an earthquake, Martin said through clenched teeth. A natural disaster. Was it? The locals seemed to think otherwise. Something about a curse. Harrington laughed. Of course, I don't believe in such nonsense. But the academic community might wonder why you concealed the discovery. Why you buried those artifacts instead of bringing them back for study. Martin saw movement in the shadows behind Harrington. Dr. Ramirez had made it to the western alcove. Some things are better left buried, Martin said. Something you've never understood. Buried like your career. Harrington sneered. Look at you, a world-class archaeologist reduced to digging graves and living in a shack. All because you couldn't face what happened. Martin took a step forward. I faced it every day. I chose to honor the dead rather than exploit them. Something you've never learned. Enough philosophy, Harrington snapped. Do we have a deal or not? Martin gave a slight nod, the signal they'd agreed upon. Immediately, Emma emerged from the eastern entrance, her phone held high. We've been recording everything, Professor Harrington, she said. Including your attempt at blackmail. Harrington spun around, his face contorting with rage. You stupid girl. This doesn't concern you. From the western alcove, Dr. Ramirez stepped forward. But it concerns me. I was there that night in Peru. Harrington's assistant backed away, clearly wanting no part of what was unfolding. It's over, Harrington, Martin said quietly. The university board will receive copies of this recording by morning. Harrington's face flushed dark red. In one swift motion, he lunged toward Emma, reaching for her phone. Martin intercepted him, but Harrington's momentum carried them both backward. They crashed against the ancient sarcophagus, the impact sending one of the lanterns toppling. The flame caught the edge of the portfolio. In seconds, the photographs began to burn. No! Harrington screamed, diving for the burning evidence. Martin faced a split-second decision: stop Harrington or save the burning photographs that contained the truth about Peru, a truth that had haunted him for 15 years. The flames were spreading rapidly across the dry, aged papers. Martin lunged for the burning photographs, his instincts overriding years of careful self-preservation. As his fingers closed around the smoldering edges, Harrington crashed into him, sending them both sprawling across the stone floor. The portfolio scattered, flames licking at the damning evidence of that fateful night in Peru. You've ruined everything. Harrington screamed, his academic composure shattered. He scrambled on hands and knees, desperately gathering the burning photos, heedless of the flames singeing his fingers. Emma rushed forward with her jacket, beating at the flames while Dr. Ramirez pulled Martin to his feet. The assistant had already fled, footsteps echoing up the stone stairwell. Let them burn, Dr. Ramirez said quietly. Some ghosts should rest. But Martin couldn't. He dropped to his knees, helping Emma extinguish the flames. 3 photographs survived intact, enough to tell the story, enough to haunt him still. Harrington clutched the charred remains of his leverage, his face twisted in a grotesque mask of rage and desperation. 15 years of research. The artifacts from that site would have made my career. They weren't yours to take, Martin said, rising slowly. Just as those influenza graves aren't yours to disturb. You self-righteous bastard. Harrington's voice dropped to a venomous whisper. You think hiding those artifacts was noble? You were a coward then, and you're a coward now. Dr. Ramirez stepped between them. I was there, Professor. I saw what happened when those artifacts were removed from their resting place. The tremors began within minutes. Coincidence? Harrington spat. Perhaps, Ramirez conceded. But 5 people died that night. 5 people whose families deserved better than to have their deaths exploited for academic glory. Emma held up her phone. The university board will be interested in this recording. Attempted blackmail, threatening a colleague, planning to desecrate marked graves against community wishes. The blood drained from Harrington's face as the reality of his situation dawned on him. His reputation, his funding, his prestigious position, all hanging by a thread. You wouldn't dare, he whispered. I would, Emma replied steadily. Unless. Martin glanced at her, surprised by the steel in her voice. Unless you withdraw your application to excavate the influenza graves, she continued. And publicly acknowledge that the site should remain undisturbed out of respect for the community's wishes. Harrington's laugh was hollow. And destroy my career. I'd rather take my chances with the board. There's more, Martin said quietly, picking up one of the surviving photographs. The artifacts we found that night, I didn't destroy them. I reburied them, documented their location. He met Harrington's gaze. I can give you the coordinates. Harrington's eyes widened with naked greed. In exchange for leaving the influenza graves alone. Permanently. The silence in the crypt stretched taut as Harrington calculated his options. "Fine," he finally hissed. "The coordinates first. After you've made your public statement withdrawing from the influenza site," Martin countered. Harrington's shoulders slumped in defeat. "You've won this round, Keller." As they climbed the stairs back to the cemetery grounds, the first light of dawn filtered through the trees. Harrington walked ahead with Dr. Ramirez, already negotiating the wording of his withdrawal statement. Emma fell into step beside Martin. "Those coordinates," she whispered. "Are they real?" Martin watched the morning mist swirling among the headstones. "Real enough to keep him occupied for years, searching a site I already cleared of anything significant." "A lie, then." Martin shook his head. "A necessary compromise. The dead deserve their peace, but some men need the illusion of victory to accept defeat." The cemetery was quiet now, the measuring stakes Harrington had placed already seeming like relics of a battle narrowly averted. The weeks that followed brought a gentle rhythm back to Martin's life. The cemetery returned to its peaceful state, with only the occasional mourner or curious visitor breaking the silence. He resumed his daily routines, tending to the grounds at dawn, maintaining the old records in the afternoon, and walking the perimeter at dusk to ensure all was well. But something had changed within him. The burden of secrets he'd carried for decades had lightened. Each morning, he would pause by the influenza graves, now permanently protected, and feel a sense of completion he hadn't known was missing. Emma visited often, bringing coffee and questions about the cemetery's history. Their conversations had evolved from professional courtesy to genuine friendship, perhaps something more. "You know," she said one evening as they sat on the bench near the old oak, "the town council is considering making this place a historical landmark." Martin nodded, satisfied. "It's about time." As dusk settled over the headstones, Martin noticed a small package leaning against the cemetery gate. No postmark, no address, just his name written in elegant, unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a weathered journal and a note: "You protected our secrets. Now we must warn you about what lies beneath the north corner. Some things should remain buried forever." The north corner, the only section of the cemetery he'd never fully explored. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video if you enjoyed this mysterious tale. Share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think lies beneath the north corner?